Hi, I'm Phil DiMartino. Welcome to another episode of the Create Smarter podcast. It's about that time where institutions begin planning for their giving days. Believe it or not, it is that time of year already, but where should you start? Tyler and I sat down with Julia Motl Lowe from Tufts University to talk about how to build a successful strategy for your day of giving. There is no one better to learn from than Julia. Let's get it started. Julia, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm well. Thank you so much. Do you want a little bit of
yes,
the usual?
Please. Tell us about yourself and all the good stuff.
All the good stuff. Okay. Well, I'm Julia Motl Lowe. I'm Director of Annual Giving Initiatives. I have worked at Tufts for ever and a day. So I started my career in admissions and then pivoted over to fundraising in 2003 and ran the annual fund at the Fletcher School for a number of years and have spent about the last decade, which has flown by, doing various forms of strategy for the entire annual giving system within the university. So
annual giving maybe now is synonymous with days of giving, but it hasn't always been. I think like a lot of people now, that's their relationship with annual funds, especially donors. But that obviously wasn't always the case. What was the first inkling for you that Tufts was jumping on board with this, and what made you all kind of take the leap and say, we need to do a one-day fundraising campaign?
We realized that we wanted to do something that would enable us to broaden our donor base. And Tufts has always, has worked very hard to create a path to securing exceptional gifts, large gifts. But we don't have as long a history in securing the gifts from the broad base of support, which is really synonymous with the level of institution that Tufts has become. So we really wanted to focus on that. And some other institutions were doing their own days of giving, and it seemed like a good idea at the time. We are a sort of quasi-centralized institution, so we decided that we're not going to have an easy time finding a date on our own. Our founding date is not the same date as our professional schools. Everyone has a different feeling of what would be the best time to do it. So we heard this inkling of something called a Giving Tuesday, and we're like, oh, well, this is great. This solves that problem for us. We don't have to go through any political quagmire. We can just say, we're going to try this. And we did. We hopped in on the second year that Giving Tuesday existed with really zero expectations.
Right.
I think our goal at the time was somewhere like 300 gifts. We just were like, well, our baseline had been normally the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, we get 18 gifts, right. 18 donors. So anything above 18 was woo, we were in it. So I think we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 gifts the first year, which we blew our mind, and it's been incremental growth ever since.
Right.
So, and pivoting and changing and adjusting. Obviously, the pandemic and things have made things a little different. But last year we landed at 9,300 gifts,
right.
$4.2 million.
And that's one of the things I wanted to bring up that we are talking about here today is a lot of times people look at a Giving Tuesday or a Giving Day like you all have at Tufts, and they see those numbers, 9,300 gifts, over 4 million raised, and they say, I'm not even going to try. I
Right.
couldn't possibly get that. But the point you just made is really important. This is not how this event started. You
No.
did not start with 9,300 donors.
No, it started as, Julia, let's try this. Let's make this about 15% of your work life, so to speak.
Is it still 15%?
No, it is essentially my entire job for about 7 months of the year.
Right.
And then it peters out to like 30% for the other 5 months.
And that's a really important point for people
Right.
who are maybe diving in for the first time, I think, is that, and also it's not just you.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm the only person for whom it's almost all I do. I have other projects that I pick up along the way, but by now, certainly everyone on the annual giving team has a piece of Giving Tuesday that they help support and run. And then over time, more and more, particularly of my major gift development officers, have been crucial in securing challenge donors as well.
Right. We're going to talk more about challenges in a second because that's a hugely important part of it. You mentioned starting out early on, and I think one of the first questions that comes to mind for people when they're trying to host a giving day, a day of giving is, can I do it on my own, or do I need to get some help? And when I say help, I mean technology help.
Yep.
For me, when I started out hosting a giving day at a different institution, it was one of the first questions we grappled with, because a large institution especially has a really big team dedicated to gift processing.
Right.
That said, you mentioned the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, normally you 18 gifts.
Right.
To go from 18 even to a couple hundred, that's a huge leap. And just the processing, never mind everything else that comes with the technology platform, you need some help.
Yep.
So what was that process like for you? Did you start out with a technology platform, and how has that evolved over time?
So no, I think the general thinking was we wanted to prove the proof of concept. We have historically created a lot of bespoke products that were just unique to our needs. So our online giving page was not out of a box solution. It was something we had specifically made for us. So it was literally working with our gift processing team. I shudder when I think about this. We worked with them. We agreed on hourly, or I don't know, a specific number of times of the day that they would upload the donors, send us an Excel file. We had our communications team create this really cute live, now granted the expectations were different a decade ago as well, but a live donor wall that was searchable, and then we would manually update those names, and then at the time be like, oh sure, we'll correct those mistakes that you made. But anyway, so it was just it was doable for 600, and then we reached a point where it was clear that, which should have been reached before, but it was very clear that we could not go on without some technological support. And so we then pivoted to a platform, and now we have all of our technology, our gift processing, crowdfunding, online giving is all in one product.
And that's a really smart way to do it,
yes.
Right? Because it's not an insignificant investment. So if you're going to invest in it, I think if you can find a way to make it work beyond just a day of giving, whether it's
yes.
for crowdfunding at least, or all-encompassing, that's a huge way to be able to help sell it internally too.
Yep. And it's still, just in case any of my gift processing friends are out here watching this, we still could not do it without the enormous amount of work it entails.
Yeah.
So, but at least now we're trying to get it as smooth as possible.
Well, and the reason that you have to say that so carefully is because it is still a tremendous amount of work for gift processing, right? 9,300 gifts in a day.
Yes.
There's going to be a lag in processing, right? And that does come into play, presumably for you all for calendar year end. I would imagine that creates some challenges for you too, around timing.
And of course, Giving Tuesday always falls on the Tuesday after Thanksgiving, which inevitably falls at a time that's either month end or, we could go into the weeds of the way the gift processing thing, which I blessedly don't have to really think about. I just meet with our team several times a year and we stay in touch, and they've sorted out all those plans, but it is not an insignificant, they are without a doubt one of the internal stakeholders you want to bring on board quickly if this is what you choose to do.
Right, and as part of vetting that technology platform, I know for most people, they have to be involved from the jump to say, can you send us sample files? What does it look like? All of that stuff. From a tech standpoint, thinking about leaderboards and things like that, is there one part of the platform that jumps out to you maybe as the most important thing for you all that you use, or that you see people visiting the site for?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing is the ticker.
Mm-hmm. Just the overall,
seeing where they are. It really. We used to get phone calls, well, where am I at? How many gifts do I have? and it took about 2 years for me to be like, you can just go to the site and look it up yourself. So that made a huge difference for everybody. And then, everyone wants to be the behavior of giving on a giving day is you want to be the one who's the inflection point, right? Mm-hmm. And so you can create a series of challenges where you're having inflection points at many different times, so that you're always motivating giving, even if you haven't sent out an email or your social post isn't going out until later. So is it the person who's going to be the one who secures that gift because they're our 1,000th donor, or is it the dollar for dollar challenges? The leaderboards are huge. but not universally huge. So they
Right.
were amazingly effective for our athletics audience, not a surprise. We have tried to replicate it to have some parity among student representation because not all students at Tufts are athletes, but other groups just aren't as interested in that sort of competitive leaderboard style thing. So we've had to find other ways to encourage non-athletic groups to get involved. So
that true real-time ticker that you mentioned, it's so incredible that that's like, even internally I think about like staff and like the advancement staff, right?
Right.
Where are we at? Where are we at?
Yep.
Where are we at? Like, you don't realize how much human nature just like loves to see a number tick up.
Tick up,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, it is. It's and it's funny too because initially, of course, as fundraisers, everyone is talking about they want the dollars to tick up.
Right.
And so I've been working really hard to make sure that we can change this to the number of gifts, or now we're moving towards just donors, so that we can have this be. I mean, of course, it's lovely to raise a lot of money.
Of course, yeah.
We wouldn't say no, but we really want to keep the focus on: are we reaching those donor goals that we're looking for?
Right.
One of the big questions right now that I think we're seeing it, and I actually have it as well, does the challenge amount matter? And I think that's a kind of a good jumping off point for our next segment right here.
What do you think?
I really thought it did, and I actually think it doesn't. So there's a lot of learning that happens. I think I had this, I believe two things that I think as we've explored and become more adventurous in our strategies, I really thought we had to stick to the challenges in which a certain amount of donors unlocks the gift, because I had this I guess unfounded fear. I'm not sure where it came from, and I wasn't alone. Our whole team sort of had this thought that if you have a $5,000 challenge gift, someone's just going to go and give $5,000,
Right.
and then your whole strategy is blown, right? Whereas as the donor gift sort of equalizes the giving. So it doesn't matter if you're giving $5 or you're giving $500, all gifts have the same value, which is really the philosophy of the day for us. It's not the philosophy of the day for a lot of other organizations. Turns out you can have a whole host of challenges. You can secure $50,000, you can secure $250. And we're even going to try to explore the new platform we transitioned to, even trying to see if we could get some of our own volunteers to create their own challenges day of, which tend to be much more focused, much smaller. So you do need to have a strategy upon which you are working to communicate what those challenges are and why they're a priority and what the impact is, and even better, if possible, to layer on volunteers or other stakeholders who are pushing that challenge out to their constituents.
That's what I was going to ask you about, the importance of ambassadors in this. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit more, but when it comes to challenges, you mentioned the dollar amount not mattering as much, but we've seen a lot of institutions do these challenges where maybe the dollar amount isn't huge, but the simple fact is that there's an internal stakeholder, an old faculty advisor that has an alumni mailing list, for example, who can reach out to people and say, hey, I'm putting my name behind this. You can trust that this is legit and important. You know, will you join me in making a $10, a $20, a $30 gift? And that individual outreach from a trusted partner, that's not just the institution, seems to me that it often goes a really long way in challenges as well.
Yes, and I think that's probably why athletics is such a large portion of our day, because the coaches have figured out that this model works for them, and they not only reach out to their former students and athletes, but they do ask that the players have a role in reaching out to their friends and family. And of course, not every gift you get in a 300 gift day is, Bob, the athlete's uncle, is not probably a long-term prospect for Tufts. But it's building that energy and helping the students understand the importance of giving back as well.
Right. I do think there's a couple of important points to that. So Bob, the uncle, maybe isn't a long-term donor, but first of all, maybe Bob is a long-term donor, right?
Could be, absolutely.
And in all likelihood, you're right. But you have this page, throughout the year, the giving page has all of these cool individual campaigns. Who knows? Maybe Bob will come back and say, oh, I didn't know that Tufts had this interesting research. In addition to my nephew's, football team, I'm also interested in this research. So there's that, but then there is also just the importance, of course, of those lots of small gifts coming together and helping the team, right?
Yes.
And that's a part of this too. So I think a lot of times we would look at it and say, oh, the friends donations, and almost like, it's not as important, but there's still a chance, albeit slimmer, of longer term donors, and the money there is still not insignificant too.
Correct. Well, and Tufts has 2 schools that have predominantly Friends audiences. I mean, the Cummings School of Veterinary Medicine is mostly a grateful client, grateful patient type of audience, and then the Friedman School is, generally speaking, people who are interested in nutrition science and research. So we have learned how to do things that are sort of more traditionally nonprofit, as opposed to what one would speak of as like a higher ed lens, I guess, for those 2 particular programs.
When you think of things like that, you mentioned athletics, you mentioned some of the professional schools. This doesn't happen on your own, right? There are people who are much more involved in these constituencies than you are, that have the audience, that have the voice. What is your general approach when you look at internal partners to getting those people involved? How do you think about it? How do you break it up? And then how do you actually get these people motivated and get them on board with your cause?
So now I have the opposite problem, where everyone wants a seat at the table because they think if they just say, oh, it's Giving Tuesday, they will be part of this large sort of
and donors and dollars
snowball of
right.
an event.
Yeah.
Obviously, that was not the case in year 2 and year 3, where we didn't even have all of the professional schools on board. It took 3 years before every single graduate and professional school was participating in Giving Tuesday. It was a quasi opt-in situation. Athletics, it became very clear that was going to be a good research, a good outreach opportunity for us. We have a great partner in the arts and sciences team centrally, who does our fundraising for athletics. And so he and I have worked in very close contact for, I don't know, since the beginning of time, feels like. And then he connects with all the coaches. And we've fine-tuned that, created scripts, we created concepts. What we're doing with you guys, this whole media day, when I mentioned to the coaches that this is what we were doing, I mean, they just ate it up. So that's sort of one way of doing it, is you try to figure out who you can engage. Now what I've actually done is I've created sort of a template for the departments or the programs who raise their hand and say, oh, we want to do it. And they receive no technical support from me the first year. I provide them with a toolkit that has scripts, a timeline, sample language, everything they need, logos, but the expectation is that they will do the outreach to their constituency on their own, and the vast majority of them do it once and realize it's hard and don't do it again.
Right.
And that's okay, because as we just said, unless this revered professor or this staff person, or unless they're willing to do it, it really isn't going to work any other way. And there are a handful of organizations within, or of groups within the university, who have decided this is what they're doing, and they're all in. So that's exciting too.
And they see results.
They do.
What are some effective ways to promote a day of giving on university-owned channels? Now, this is something we talk about our internal partners. What about internal channels that you own, Julia?
So this is where Tufts being sort of quasi-centralized becomes interesting. So we have the university-wide channels on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. And those are run by University Communications. So we work together to create a strategy which has evolved over time. It's predominantly looking at sort of hype building. Facebook is not really the place to be doing solicitations anymore, especially not since they've gotten into the Giving Tuesday marketplace themselves. They are not interested in supporting your push for Giving Tuesday if you're not doing a Giving Tuesday campaign through them.
Taking them off platform.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of excitement building through those channels, and just try to keep it as fun and informational and impact oriented as possible. We've seen a little more success using LinkedIn, which we've done more recently. We've historically done a combination of, organic ads, organic posts, as well as digital ads. For us, it's such a hard thing to follow through as to whether or not it's worth the spend. So we're still figuring that out. The schools themselves have a varying degree of ownership and autonomy over their own social channels. So then you get that next layer of, some of them are super sophisticated, super interested in sharing this content, and others are not. Others have log jams as well. So So that sort of essentially that's where I think being at a large, complex organization, you naturally have a lot of different stakeholders. And there are a lot of different messages that this organization needs to communicate, and they have an enormous number of constituencies, whether it's, people who are looking at applying, people who are looking at doing research. It's not just our alumni who are coming to our social channels. So it's a balancing act, and I'm fortunate enough to work with people with whom we can dance around it together, which is good.
Well, I think it's interesting the question comes up. It's one of the most common things from our standpoint as a production partner that we see people running into, is that we have this content, now we have to make the case internally just to get our internal partners to post things up. As you mentioned, you have a good relationship with internal communications, with your marketing team, I should say, and that's great. Not everybody has that close relationship, especially advancement to central communications. The goals are not always perfectly aligned. Oftentimes, those central pages for a university page are really so heavily geared towards admissions and towards parents that they're not geared at all. They don't want to touch fundraising.
Correct.
So a lot of times we try to talk to people about, don't just try to jam this down your university communications team's throats. Like, bring them into the conversation and find out what they believe would be useful, because ultimately they do run their pages and they know what's going to succeed. So let's work together and let's find something that's going to be appealing to that audience. And if the answer is nothing, and we really genuinely don't believe the audience is right, let's not spin our wheels, and let's find those channels, the schools, the teams, those channels that do work better.
And we are we are in regular communication with all of our teams, among students, among parents, among staff and faculty. Our president, Tony Monaco, has got a fish, and I can't remember the name of the fish. Oh, come on, you guys help me.
Dottie?
Dottie, yes.
Dottie?
Good
Wow.
job. Way to go.
Wow, the fact that I know that,
You are
really.
the Tufts king.
What does that say about me?
I'm going to say it's only good things.
I don't
only good
want to
things.
brag, but I do have the Tufts mug here,
Nice,
so
nice.
I don't want to brag.
You got it all. So anyway, on a whim, we did like a little whiteboard thing that says Dottie wants to wish you a happy Tuftsgiving Tuesday, and our social team post. It was the most loved post on the entire campaign, and it was not even one that we had like mapped out. Do you think the president would let us use Dottie? I mean, it was just sort of an impulse thing. So that was a lot of fun to see too, the more playful stuff. So so it's fun. It's, as with all things across the board, it's the push and pull with everybody, right? And you just sort of have to be Gumby and figure out how to make it work.
I think the Bruce Lee quote is, you have to be water, you have to be flexible.
Yes.
I like be Gumby a little better.
Yeah.
And I think we might put that up on a sign on our wall in our office.
Okay.
You mentioned the Dottie thing isn't something you carefully plan. There is a lot of stuff that you do carefully plan.
Yep.
Some of that being the work that we work on with you, the content creation plan. What are some of the overall things you're trying to accomplish when you're putting together videos that you're going to use to promote this day? What are you trying to do when you think you interact with us and you say, we're going to create some video content that's going to go out in the days, weeks leading up to Giving Tuesday? What are you hoping that these videos will do? What are you hoping people's reaction will be? What's the overall really high-level goal of using video?
Usually I come to you guys and say, what do I want my videos to do this year? Because I don't know anymore. No, but I think that, like everything, has evolved, right? So the first year you guys did a video for us back in the Stone Age. We just put it up organically and it got 10,000 views without trying. So it was just a different universe. Now, I don't think, that's just not even a remote possibility for what we're looking at. So what we've the three of us have sat down and talked about is recognizing that you want to accomplish different things with different content. So, and tell me if I'm repeating this back to you wrong. So have I learned? Am I doing okay? Good job. Julia's the student becomes the master. So we have good open rates for our email. I know the whole Apple thing makes all the emails look like they're read, but generally speaking, our emails drive giving. And so we send our folks to our platform, which has a video, which you don't really need to convince them at that point. I feel if they're there, you want to tell a story that's a little more impactful and a message of, this is how you are going to make a difference. And then there's the whole social thing, which we're still trying to magically unlock, which really I'm just trying to stop the scroll, if at all. And I think what you guys have really brought into the conversation for us is, we have a bunch of student influencers or even faculty who could help us do that by leveraging their own networks if we give them their own, access to their own content or even a way to create content. I think one of the biggest videos that we put out on Insta was one of our faculty members who has a huge following, and our central communications tagged him, and then I use Abacus, so I'm not the one to ask.
You're leveraging those networks.
And he reshared it, and off it went. Right. So I think it's reshared, retweet, whatever. This is now we've lost any. They're fleeing.
You're spot on. You're getting the second level network, right? It goes beyond what you have access and ability for, and leverages those other people's networks. Yep. You don't have the trust or the people signed up that person does.
Right.
Before we get off content and move on to the next thing, I want to spend just a minute or two on live. We worked with you all on a live show. What were some of the lessons learned that you would want to impart on somebody taking on a live show on a giving day for the first time? What are some of the things you look at and you say, hey, this would have been helpful if we had done X, Y, or Z?
So I think one of the things, I think you probably want to know why you're doing it. I mean, that sounds ridiculous, but what is your goal? Is it number of views? I think I hadn't anticipated the energy that the actual act of filming would create. We did ours in our campus center, and the student energy was just palpable and really exciting. And I think if I had realized that, I would have worked harder to get it up on the TV screens around campus, promote it around campus more, get that buzz going within the community. Because our faculty, staff, and students are a large part of our donor community as well. And again, it's harder to break through sometimes on, on the social channels. So I think that was something that when we do it again, I would place more of a focus on. And also, which we did do, so I wouldn't say that a lesson learned, but just a lesson to do is, think about who you want to interview. We did a combo of live interviews and pre-recorded content, and think about maybe asking questions that then could be taken from the cutting room floor and repurposed for something else throughout the course of the year, because there's so many hours of content that I always say in my dream world I will do. I never really get around to doing it, but in my dream world, I'm going to come and sit on the floor of the cutting room here and find the magic content.
You're welcome to do it. There is always a lot there. Those things you just mentioned are great, are really important. I think the energy of a live, just the act of having a live show is great. One of the other potential goals we've talked to some people about for a live show on a day of giving is bringing in an audience that might not otherwise get involved by making the event, a hook with like a presentation from, a famous alum, or a research presentation. If you're like, oh, we really want to engage this specific group of people, make that live show about something where, we do live events all the time where the goal is lead generation, get people to show up. You can do that, just have it, this live event sponsored by Giving Day, right? So that's an option too. Okay, you've alluded to it a few times, so I think it's time to dive in fully and talk about the impact of athletics on Tufts Giving Tuesday. But more broadly, thinking about it for other institutions, it might be athletics, it might be some other thing. Really, it's finding that competitive constituency and making them go to work for you. How has athletics for you all as that competitive constituency emerged as a really important part of your day of giving?
So they are huge ambassadors for the excitement of it. They are reliable content providers when we need a student voice on our videos. The coaches are, like everything, it was gradual. At first it was maybe 2 coaches who wanted to be part of it, and then it was 10, and now they're all tripping over themselves because they're really excited. And at first it was just a general goal to give to athletics, and then the teams started doing their own like back of the envelope, behind the scenes challenges, and I was like, no, why don't we make this official?
Bring it into the fold.
So we've sort of grown that, where we just sort of listed what the challenges were, but they weren't active on the day. And then finally, we actually got to a space where we had, I think, close to 20 live team challenges, dollar for dollar matches for on the day, and that just drove everything out of it. So we had that, and we also had leaderboards. And most platforms will have some sort of leaderboard function. You can do them for, in our case, we could make it a reunion class leaderboard. You could have it be a group leaderboard.
Fun, right.
I think if I were if I were a university or a college, that isn't as complicated as we are, in the sense that we're doing a giving day for across the university. I think a reunion leaderboard would be great. I do think that classes would be competitive with each other. Independent school, maybe a parents' class leaderboard would be an interesting approach if the technology is there to select parent. We have not found the second magic button, as I mentioned, as it relates to what is the leaderboard for non-athletic student involvement.
Yep.
We've tried our a cappella groups, which have huge play, but not there. They don't compete against each other. I mean, they aren't really competing against each other. So what we've pivoted for other student groups is we just offer a challenge award. So they just sort of compete against themselves to get a challenge gift.
Right.
So.
Right. Well, and really quickly, the results definitely speak for themselves in regards
Yes.
to athletics. More than 50% generally
Yep.
of the gifts from Tufts on Tufts Giving Tuesday
Yep.
come from athletics constituencies.
And that year that we were at almost 10,000, it was like almost 60%.
It's unbelievable.
So, yeah.
It's just huge numbers. And, for you all, it's athletics. For some of the other institutions we work with, Greek life is one that
Yes.
we've seen some
Yep, of
institutions have
course.
success with. There is competition built in there. Something like a cappella, depending on the school, could work.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yep.
So
we really thought. I thought I'd found the second Nirvana, but no, it just didn't work. So,
Yeah.
which is also okay.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I want to move on to talking about selecting a date. So you
Yes.
all do your event on Giving Tuesday.
Yes.
Pros and cons to that. In my mind, pros being there's a lot of awareness around it already.
Yes.
Cons being there's a lot of awareness around it already. There's competing priorities, right?
Yep.
So traditional nonprofits like dog rescues for me, health organizations, right? All of these different nonprofits, conservation groups, all of these things that are not your alma mater are hitting you up for donations. That doesn't happen throughout most of the year when you have this, you have your alumni.
Right.
And most people have, one undergraduate alum, one or two graduate alums. You have kind of a leg up there. It's this almost unnatural competition that doesn't always happen. Now that said, the awareness that comes with Giving Tuesday helps level that out, but like I said, pros and cons. Now that you're 9-10 years into this, what are your thoughts on the date and whether or not somebody launching a Giving Day, a day of giving, should try to make it coincide with Giving Tuesday?
So when we started on Giving Tuesday, remember Giving Tuesday wasn't a thing, right? Like it was just this nascent idea of maybe we can create. So we weren't dealing with fighting for airtime. And now, we must answer this question ourselves every year. Should we pivot away? Should we pivot away? Are we getting lost? And our volunteers are ready.
Mm-hmm.
They have been trained. And so I think we are fine on Giving Tuesday because we have a 10-year tradition of doing it there.
Yeah.
And we have a cohort of anywhere between 300 and 600 alums who are going to reach out and make sure that we get this done. If I were starting all over again at this point in time, I think I'd probably not choose Giving Tuesday unless you, especially if we are leaning into our earlier commentary of how this could be incremental. It's going to be really hard to break through Giving Tuesday with the resources we deployed 10 years ago now.
Right.
It would be next to impossible. So I would say, assuming you aren't at a place that would make finding a unifying date challenging, the founding date or just some random date you want to, or a lot of places are splitting it and doing an athletics giving day and then a general giving day or whatever. I don't think I've ever seen anything other than athletics being parsed out on its own.
But no, more people are doing that. You're right. I didn't even think of mentioning that.
So there's a lot of different, and also talking about incremental, if you have good athletics partners, that's the way you could start. Don't mess with the whole day that seems, sorry, I'm flipping my hand all over the place.
No,
I gesture
please,
a lot.
that's fine.
So start with athletics and build from there. So I think I would probably choose not Giving Tuesday. But if someone really is super keen on Giving Tuesday, I mean, I'm happy to provide tips to that person on how to break through the noise too.
Yeah, and it is, like you mentioned, it's a date that's agnostic of any politics, right?
Right.
It's here and it's provided for you.
Yep.
You mentioned incremental gains and growing the event. Once you get to a certain point, you have staff resources, you've done a ton of marketing toolkits, you have content, all the stuff we've talked about to this point. How do you continue to grow it beyond what your staff can do? We talked about ambassadors and volunteers. Yep. Is that now where you look, kind of looking forward with this event? And is that a place where you would suggest people have done maybe a couple of years of this look to try to make their event continue to grow?
Yes. So you eventually will hit the point where we hit, which is, are we just getting people who would give to Tufts anyway, give on Giving Tuesday, and we do all this work for people who would just, give online anyway? Which I don't think is the case. I still think there's an untapped market of acquisition donors for us, and that is going to come through volunteers. So the biggest reason we chose to transition to the new platform we're using is because it has a volunteer module that interacts with the Giving Day module. So our volunteers whom we get to sign up, and there's sort of two layers. So you have the volunteers with whom you have a deep relationship, and they can just interact with it and make their own challenges and communicate very clearly with their own volunteers. Then there's this whole other layer of volunteering where you just click on the platform itself, and we have that in our old technology as well. And they just sign up to be a volunteer just for that day,
right,
which is also a wonderful opportunity. But that is the one thing, going back to would you use Giving Tuesday. If you knew you had a built-in audience that could cut through the noise, I think you could do Giving Tuesday without a doubt. If you're just going to be relying on mass marketing, I think that's where we trip into everyone's, the puppies need help, the hospitals need help, the horses need help. So they all do need help. Philanthropy is such, it sounded so cynical.
The horses, but you can help the horses through Tufts.
You can. You can also help the puppies and the heart. All of this goes back to Tufts, right?
But actually, you're making a really important point, which is highlighting impact, right? Sometimes people, this is the whole point of highlighting the real things that are happening at an institution, which is that all of these things you mentioned happen at a university, especially at a larger university, and it's making sure you provide that information to people and let them know, to the point of, I think you said Billy's uncle, the soccer player or whatever.
Right, yeah.
Hey, Billy's uncle, I know you like your nephew, and that's great, but there's also research and
absolutely,
veterinary school and all of these other things. Highlight the impact. That's a hugely important
part. And a Giving Day is a really fabulous way. If you were sort of in a space where you had been an institution where unrestricted giving was what the annual fund was synonymous with, the Giving Day concept has really allowed us to explore more cause-based or impact-based giving that doesn't decimate the unrestricted giving, but allows us to reach a broader audience and allows them to choose what they want to be supporting. Particularly at the veterinary school, just like you said, we have all these, the wildlife clinic is so popular on Giving Tuesday, because who doesn't want to help the squirrel that fell from the tree?
Well, it's unique
you
too.
do, right? And it's so it's it allows you to really tell your stories in a more unique and engaging way.
For Tyler, for Julia, I'm Phil. Thank you so much for joining us today. Hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you. It's fun.
Bye.